Today for our Speaker series, I'm Becky Spica. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer here at Spica Design and Manufacturing. And today we're discussing for ZEB, top of bus is top of mind. And our guest is David Carr. He's the Director of Zero Emission Vehicle Program at CapMetro. David, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't you give us just a little bit about yourself and your background?
All right, well, thank you. My name is David Carr. I'm the Director of the Zero Emission Vehicle Program here at CapMetro. I've been at CapMetro for just almost 2 years, and we are deploying 104 electric buses and 157 chargers in various forms and fashion. Prior to my experience here at CapMetro, I was at RTC in Reno, Nevada. Starting in 2013, we were deploying electric vehicles. We deployed a third of our fleet as electric vehicles, and we started deploying hydrogen there as well. Prior to that, I worked at the universities and a city and worked in transportation primarily. And I've been working in fleet for nearly 30 years.
What got you into this industry to begin with? Just out
I don't know if we have time for the whole story, but no, I got into auto parts, and then I went into fleet management and for Pac Bell, and I went to a university, worked for the city. I've worked at another university and a transit agency. So it's always been around vehicles and fleet.
Sure.
With a name like Carr, I think you're kind of you have no choice unless you're a football player. And so, yeah, I've just always been interested in vehicles, and always had a passion for systems and operations. And I've been doing this, like I said, almost 30 years.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today. We have a few questions here for you. Really excited to get your insight. So let's go ahead and we'll just dive right in.
Okay,
so my first question for you is, as someone on the inside of a transit agency, can you paint a picture of what it really means for a transit agency once a switch to zero emission buses is announced, from the perspective of a transit director, operators, maintenance personnel, and ultimately the members of the community?
Well, that's a lot in that question. So I always say that the bus is the easy part. You know, you can buy a bus and you put it on the road, and there you go. Well, if it's another diesel bus, then you just plug it into the whole scheme and it operates like everything else. An electric bus, everything, it's not one thing, it's everything. Your fueling changes, your maintenance changes, just everything that that is impacted by the electric vehicle being a different type of transportation. It's the different propulsion system. So you have to learn that. It has some operating characteristics that are different. It has maintenance technology that's completely different. So you have to educate the entire workforce, and you have to kind of revisit your entire process, because primarily the range changes on a bus. It's less than a diesel. So you have to, so it becomes complicated to plug into schedules. It becomes complicated to operate, and then the maintenance cycles are different. The safety is different. The tools are different. So everything you do to approach the vehicle is different. So you have to invest in your staff training, your operator training. So again, it's not one thing; it's kind of everything. And so you have to look across the board and look at how each of those areas impacted, from the operator to finance to everything in between.
With this being such a huge transition for everybody, what makes it worth it? How are people justifying this transition?
Well, it's simple. We want to be at zero emissions. Diesel buses create a lot of the majority of greenhouse gases in our industry is from transportation, and buses create a great deal of emissions. So if we look at our enterprise or our agency as a whole, the greatest single contributor to greenhouse gases is our buses. So the greatest single impact we can have is to reduce our emissions profile on our buses. Obviously, buses in and of themselves reduce emissions tremendously across the community because, if you're riding in a bus, you're reducing emissions across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But by incorporating an electric vehicle or a zero emission vehicle into that scheme, you not only have a clean vehicle, but you have a clean mode of transportation. And it just makes it's a natural fit.
Mm. You are an early adopter of zero emission buses in public transportation. How did your choice of technology evolve over the years?
So going into electric vehicles, they were small battery packs that were frequently charged. And then we got the larger bus with a larger battery pack, and we were charging them at increasingly higher rates. So at 60 kilowatts, 120 kilowatts, and then 450 kilowatts. So we're charging these vehicles at different rates. We have different duty cycles for them, and we're able to see how they perform. As we got to a certain point, we realized the vehicle would fit a certain percentage of our routes without in-route charging. We put in-route charging in, but we realized that we're limited still by range, and then particularly in Reno, it's temperature. Because it was so cold, we had to create blocks of work for winter operations versus blocks of work for the rest of the year. And
you
so
you're chatting with folks from Montana. It's
yes,
that Reno, Nevada has cold winters.
Yeah, well, they're not as cold as yours, but they definitely get, when it's 20 degrees outside or 0 degrees outside, your bus is going to an electric bus operates differently. So then we started looking at other options. What could we do? Hydrogen came so we started looking at hydrogen and started a pilot project on hydrogen buses. Well, we can't get to hydrogen from battery electric in one fell swoop because one, the technology's not quite there. The cost of fuel is really high. So we got some demonstration project, and we bought hybrid vehicles in the meanwhile. So I look at that as a bridge technology. So we have a battery electric bus that was a battery bus, and we had a battery electric bus that was a hybrid bus, and then we got a battery bus that's a hydrogen bus. So all these vehicles have the battery as the common denominator. We're getting to zero emission, but it's going to take us a while to figure it out. So I think it is an evolution. We look at it here at CapMetro as technology of choice. As we move forward in this journey, we're going to look at each technology and weigh the cost benefit. We're going to look at it and see what's going to fit our operating model as well as our customer model. And so we have to be mindful that there is a bottom line, but also that zero emission is going to be more expensive. And so we're having to weigh those out as we move forward. We're going to look at different technology as it emerges, and maybe a hydrogen vehicle will use gray hydrogen to start, but we'll get to green hydrogen. We're using battery electric buses now. We pay a premium for the electricity, so we have green energy. So our vehicles are truly zero emission. So as we move forward, by 2040, we're going to have between 400 and 500 zero emission vehicles. And we don't think it's necessarily going to be one type of vehicle. We think it's going to be maybe several different types of vehicle.
Is there a reason that you're looking at 2040 as the deadline?
That's a political deadline. I think it's very popular in this country to say 2040 is the deadline for us. Okay. I think it meets a lot of different political things. Okay. And for us, because we buy buses on a 12-year cycle, 2040 gives us enough time to figure it out and implement it and have it ready to go by 2040.
Sure. Besides the obvious benefit of zero emissions, what are the benefits of a transit agency transitioning to a zero emission fleet?
Well, you hope that benefits such as lower cost, better improved maintenance, I think opportunities for learning and training and elevating your workforce. Those things all come to mind as opportunities. Battery electricity in and of itself can be less expensive than diesel fuel. Hydrogen, on the other hand, can be more expensive. So both get you to zero emissions at some point. The obvious benefits of of zero emissions is no emissions and quieter operation, and they say things like fewer parts and less maintenance. Well, I think there might be fewer parts, but I think there's just as much maintenance and because there's a learning curve for the maintenance, it's really challenging for us. And those parts, they're not cheap. They're expensive parts. So some of the benefits that they tout really aren't really being realized. But and these buses are harder to maintain and operate. But then it's like any new technology, as we get better at it and as we learn more and our body of knowledge is increased, we'll be better at that too.
Something you mentioned, you said that there is the realized benefit of, I guess, training the skill set into the workforce. I've heard also from others in the industry that workforce is a huge conversation. There can be a lot of turnover within different agencies, just based on the nature of the work or the nature of the economy right now. And so having a skill set that is consistent or known by all that are working in transit can be really challenging. So with everything going on, having to do all this new training, I guess when you said that there's the realized benefit of having the workforce trained differently, it just made me think in a little bit more along the lines of how challenging that is already to just have that consistent training.
Well, just kind of part related to that is like even a diesel mechanic today is very valuable. A diesel technician is in high demand and they have a very specialized skill set. If you add to that a layer of zero emission vehicle maintenance person, their value is actually enhanced. Their technical skill set expands. They have a lot more awareness of high voltage, diagnostics, and a lot of different systems that didn't previously have. And there's a risk reward to that. I've always been of the mind that, you hire people, you train them, you elevate them, and you really want them to be better. Now, the risk with that is that they will leave.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're an employer of choice and people are coming to you and they say, man, I can go there and I can learn a lot of stuff. And then I have the option to leave, or I can stay and learn more stuff. It makes you a better, more attractive employer. Anytime you're hiring, it's like bus drivers. You hire a bus driver, they get a CDL, they start operating a vehicle, and then they realize they can go drive a dump truck. Well,
Sure.
if people want to go drive a dump truck, you really can't, deny them that. But, we're in the business to train people. That skill set's valuable. We provide a really good environment to work in. There's a lot of flexibility, a lot of benefits to working in a transit agency, and it's very, very reliable and stable. And so we understand that if we hire this next generation of workforce in battery electric vehicles and other technology like that, there's a big risk that there's a large number of them that will leave. But there's also the thing they're going to stay, and that makes us a employer of choice. So people will want to come to work for us because they know they can learn the skill, they know they can develop themselves as individuals, and it's a good place to work.
Mm-hmm. We definitely share that philosophy as well. Almost even wanting to train your replacement, basically giving them enough skill set so that they can really elevate and stay with you, or go somewhere else and really thrive. So it's a good philosophy. Okay, here's the fun one. Ready for the fun question?
Okay.
You're hoping.
They're all fun.
Whoops. Okay, you stated that the future is on top of the bus. Could you expand on that?
Well, I think that technology is expanding, and we realize that there's a lot of space on a vehicle, and a lot of it's being relocated on top of the vehicle. Batteries, HVAC. If you look on the top of a modern bus, you might see 6 or 8 antennas. I mean, all this stuff has to go somewhere, and a lot of it is communications technology, whether it's infotainment. I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Anyway, there's other things on top, and then the HVAC and batteries on top of the bus. One, you just have to put the battery somewhere. So, I mean, you're running out of room because they're putting so many batteries on the vehicle. But then putting the HVAC on top makes a lot of sense. Take it up out of the road dirt, move it on top. Put your compressor up there, move it out of the stream of the dirt, and your wear characteristics are better. Your maintenance is easier. And so your access is easier. And it's really not it's out of harm's way in terms of dirt and debris, but it's also more accessible in some form or fashion, depending on how you get to the rooftops.
Mm-hmm. Do you see other components then in the near future or in the extended future that will migrate up to the top?
I think as you added systems there and you have access to it in the sense of using your platform or other forms of access to there, it's natural to put it there. You're running out of room. You open up the cabinet in a bus behind the driver, and you're going to see this cabinet's full of stuff now. Before, they hung their coat there, and there was their lunch. And now we have a server for each kind of different platform, whether it's CAT AVL, it's announcements, it's infotainment. There's a whole bunch of technology in there, and then you have air purification. A bus is becoming way more sophisticated, has a lot of technology built in between cameras, security, fare collection and reporting, all that stuff, passenger counting, all that stuff's in a bus now. And so it becomes this really large technology platform where we're collecting a lot of data, where you need access to this. And, they've run out of real estate on the bottom of the bus. Now they're using that real estate on top of a bus.
Do you have any stories of things that went wrong during the transition of a fleet to ZEB, how they got corrected, and what other transit agencies can learn from that?
Well, I'm pretty much sworn to secrecy, and I can't divulge all that. But I would, sorry, I would say that it's a journey that I've been on with lots of other agencies. So I've emulated a number of different agencies and what they're doing, and I kind of follow their path. I've seen, Foothill Transit's a great example, and AC Transit. These guys are really pioneers in this area, and you can see a lot of the things they've done. And when I was in Reno, I was right next door. So I had the opportunity to work with these guys. They're brilliant guys. They're doing great work, and not everything worked out. A lot of the technology we purchased, particularly early on, didn't work. It didn't go 12 years. In fact, some of the stuff we had to retire early. Some of the stuff failed to function properly. Here, even there's an example of where we bought some equipment, and then they came to us, like 3 years later and 4 years later, and said, "What's at end of life?" I said, "Well, wait a minute. We just bought this, and we have to use this for 12 years." And they're saying, "Well, the best thing to do is buy new ones." I'm like, that doesn't sound like a good deal to me. So I think it really revolves around, how you approach the technology. Because I've seen it where people buy an electric vehicle, and for whatever reason, they park these electric vehicles. And so it's not necessarily a reflection on the vehicle, but how their approach is, how they manage this, and because it's difficult. I'm telling you right now, it's difficult to do this, and you really have to go into it with your eyes open, and you really have to be prepared to work hard and figure out these processes and stuff. Because if you rely on the OEM, and they're good people and they're training people, but they can't keep up with this. Your own people have to be the experts. Your own people have to gather this knowledge. So if they don't keep up with it and they don't learn on that learning curve, at some point there becomes a disconnect. You can't maintain the bus anymore. The batteries become a little goofy. Everything starts getting out of skew, and then you just cannot maintain them anymore. And I've seen that over and over, and it's really it's a tragedy, because what happens is through no fault of their own, if they're operating 100 diesel buses and they've got these 4 battery electrics, those battery electrics are going to get pushed to the side because they don't need them to operate.
Sure.
So, and then when they finally turn their attention to them, it becomes progressively more difficult to get out of that. And at some point you give up, saying, "Well, we can't fix these. They're too hard. We know how to do the diesels. They're easy to do. We've got this. So we're not going to do that." It takes a concerted and focused effort to keep those vehicles on the road, to learn the technology, and to be able to do this in a way to be successful. I imagine it's like, early computer days. Those things. I remember computers. They would lock up, and you'd have to reboot them. And you would. I can, because I remember on our early bus, something would stop, and the engineer would say, "Well, turn it off and turn it back on."
Yeah. Yeah.
And we did that, and the bus would work. And to me, that's not a diagnostic or a procedural thing, but that's how it was in the early days. And I think as we get more sophisticated, our approach to maintenance gets more sophisticated. But it's like anything else. When you first start out, you have to learn the basics. You have to learn the ropes, and it's a challenge.
Sure. We've chatted with a few folks that have elaborated on the challenge of training, and from your perspective, what are some of the resources you would recommend to overcome this training hurdle for people that are just starting this transition, if any?
Well, we have a couple different approaches here. First off, there's two things you have to do. You have to train a very specific core group of people to be champions, and that's across the agency. So in each part, people have to understand the bus, understand the technology, understand the demands of this, and be an advocate for it. They have to want to do it. They have to be a champion for it. Otherwise, it struggles to take place. I think so. You try to get this core group of people. Give them the extra training, give them the attention, give them the information they need to be able to move this forward. But then you need to train everybody. And what I mean there is, an electric bus has got some very unique features, high voltage. So you can't train just the maintenance people. You have to train the people in the lot. You have to train the drivers. You have to train everybody across the spectrum, because now there's a hazard that wasn't associated with a bus before. And so you train a core, you train everybody, and then you try to bring up the whole workforce over a period of time. One of the things I've done in the past, and I'm doing here as well, is that we're investing a lot of money in training. It's not a small amount. It's a significant amount of training. We'll spend $750,000 on training in the next 3 years. And that's to create this core curriculum, create this core group of champions, to elevate them to a high level, Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3, high level diagnostics, so that when these buses are here and they're operating, it's our charge, it's our knowledge and our expertise that's going to keep this fleet running. Because if you look at a fleet of 100 buses, if you have a tech or two from the OEM, they're not going to be able to keep up.
Sure.
And those techs, they've only been hired a few weeks sooner or later, as the case may be, than the techs that I have. So there's very, very few really experienced veteran people that have been around a long time. But if you look in a diesel shop, you've got a huge group of guys that have been around a long time. I think sometimes they just smell the tailpipe and they know what's wrong with the bus. And a battery bus doesn't do that. A battery bus, you're going to plug it in, you're going to run the diagnostics, you're going to get codes. You have to go through a route tree, and you have to look at that. And the same thing with data. You look at a Cummins engine, they have history on a Cummins engine that goes back a long time. You go on an electric bus, they don't have history that goes back only a few weeks sometimes. So then you really don't have the integrated structure to understand that data. So there's always that challenge.
What's your advice for those that are eager to join the zero emission transit industry or movement?
I think if you're looking for an industry that is stable, dynamic, technology is at the fore of what we do in transit. We're adopting technology quickly. We're using technology. We need to train a generation of people in this technology, and it's not just in the maintenance floor. It's in the operations. It's in our other systems. So it's a really interesting environment to be in, where we have embraced technology and as an enterprise, and we want to be a data-driven organization. We want to be associated with leading edge technology. We want to provide our customer a special experience, give them a clean bus that's on time, that's quiet, and that operates in a reliable, secure environment. And that's what we're creating in a bus. Between the security cameras, between the electric vehicle where it's quieter and it's cleaner. We're trying to create this environment in our bus, but we're also doing that throughout the agency, where sustainability is a key point. technology and use of data is a key point. We're trying to do this as an enterprise because we want to be more than just a bus. We want to be a major contributor to the community and integrating transportation into the fabric of the community.
What does a successful transition to zero emissions look like for a transit agency? Or when do they know that the transition has been a success?
I think that you're looking at continuous improvement. I think success is a relative factor. I think there's small steps. I think there's things you make work. I think right now, with the state of the industry, the state of the vehicles, the state of transition, success is hard to kind of really get your head wrapped around. You get those small victories, you get vehicles to operate in a certain way, and each agency finds its own way. There's some agencies that use these vehicles and they are fully integrated into their fleet. They operate every day and they rely on them every day and they do a very good job. When you're first starting out, it's really hard to do that, and you can't expect to go from day one to drop the bus in and it's going to be perfect, because it's not. Mm-hmm. And so you have to understand at each progression, at each level you're at. When you're first starting out, you're going to measure success one way. When you've been doing it a while, it's another measure. And if you've really got a mature fleet where you have this, and there's only a few that have, even then they're constantly facing challenges too. The cost of fuel, the availability of electricity, the building of infrastructure, all this stuff evolves and changes almost daily. And so you're trying to find this rhythm where you're moving along with technology, you're integrating it into the fleet, you're trying to keep up with things, but your success is measured, I think, every day. You make pull out, you get your drivers in there and they're happy. We're able to maintain the vehicles. I mean, to me, that's success.
Are there common metrics that agencies look at during this transition?
The FTA, I think, really is famous for all the data we collect for them. The passenger counting, passenger miles. We do a really great job, I think, of capturing a lot of data. As far as the zero emission bus itself and how we measure performance and a lot of those characteristics, I think there's a gap. I think there's a lot of information. There's a lot of information we gather, but we are not really sure how to use it yet. And we're not, maybe we're not using it as effectively as good. We talked the other day about the data we're collecting in our data system, our telemetry system on the bus, and we're trying to figure out how to apply that to day-to-day operations. And they're just not synchronized yet. We just don't have that, decades of established data collection and application yet. We're getting there. We're working on it. The call I had just before I called you was how are we looking at the data for performance and applying it to a different block of work. We want to see, let's push this a little more. Let's try to see what this full range is. One of the fellows I was talking to said, well, let's put it on this route and see if it runs to zero. I'm like, no. we don't want to run it till the tow truck shows up, but we can move it from 100 miles to 150 miles to 200 miles, and we can find that delta. We can find that margin that we can find that this model bus and these types of temperatures will operate at this range. And if we do that, we'll be able to take these vehicles and put them in. We have 6 different types of vehicles. We'll put them in 6 classifications or even 2 classifications and put them in those route blocks where they best fit. Mm-hmm. So if we do that and you marry up the performance expectation and duty cycle to the route, these vehicles will perform well. As long as you don't ask them to do anything they're not capable of or stretch them too far, then they should operate every day.
Mm-hmm. My final question for you, everything we've talked about and much, much more is the air you breathe. This is the world you've been in for, 30 years, and you've been through this transition a handful of times. So what is currently most top of mind for you within this industry, within the challenges? What's been taking up some brain matter lately?
I think the transition of the workforce, I'm getting towards the end of my career. I'm training my peers on how to manage systems. It's
Mm-hmm.
not one thing, it's everything. And it's not just the maintenance part, it's the integration of all these pieces that support each other. We have an ecosystem that is evolving and that evolved over decades for a diesel bus and how people do pull out and how they do this. Now with the electric vehicle, there's a whole layer of complexity that's
Mm-hmm.
added to that. So I work with people on training for maintenance, training for charger monitoring. I work with them on we're looking at energy management. How do you run the chargers in a way that is the most effective? Because if you plug in all your buses exactly the same time, charge them at full blast, you're going to get a nice bill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not a nice bill. And,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to learn how to manage that charging, manage that operation in a way that gives you the best value. And so whether it's charging, monitoring, because you have to monitor the bus. There's reasons to monitor the bus in terms of any type of thermal event or anything else that could occur. A drop in the state of charge of the battery, because if you're driving a bus, the a string of batteries goes out and the range goes from 70% less to 20% less. You got to be aware of that. So we're doing things differently. We're looking at things. And then getting the folks that have been doing it the same way for a very long time to look at it differently is where I really kind of get the energy.
Mm.
I'm working with the maintenance trainers. I'm working with the OCC, the Operations Control Center. What are you guys looking at? What do you have on your screens? I'm looking at the energy management people. We've never looked at energy. You get a bill and you pay it, right? And now we're looking at, okay, if we can't charge them this way. We have to monitor the chargers to make sure they're all working and the buses are all charging. And then we have to look at a way to manage that distribution of energy. And we're just getting into that.
Mm.
The other things I get to work on is a plan for fleet integration and the long-term plan for where we're going to buy buses and what type of technology. I'm doing an autonomous vehicle project. It's
Mm.
really exciting in that this vehicle can operate on its own. It will come into the yard and it will go into the charger. It'll go into the bus wash. It'll go park itself. And all these things can be done in an automated way. And that makes the bus safer to operate. The yard is a safer place to work. Also, the safety goes beyond just the yard in that if you have ADAS in a bus and it's being driven by the operator and it has brake assist, lane departure, and these type of safety features, it makes it inherently safer for the driver, the passengers, and the public. So I'm in a unique opportunity to do a lot of different things. I think I'm really trying to share that with the enterprise. I'm trying to do it in a way that my peers and my partners in here, I'm sharing with them the information I've gathered over the years and saying, if we can go this way, it's really going to help you. If you look at it this way, you get another perspective. If we get the training done, we get the training down, and we do a good job with that, that's really going to be the cornerstone for what we do forward. And whether it's maintenance training, operator training, OCC trainers, planning trainers, all this stuff across the board contributes to the whole enterprise.
Was there anything else that you wanted to mention in this time with us?
Well, I think that I'll share just a story. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if this needs to be included or not, but I was working on the top of on a bus, and I was inspecting it. I was crawling around there, and I had the harness on and everything, and I tweaked my back pretty bad.
Oh, no.
Because I was just twisting. And it wasn't like I fell, and it wasn't like I got hurt and had to go to the hospital or anything, but it was there. And, when I was at the factory, I got a chance to look at the platform like that, and I said, that's what we have to go. Because it's the transition from the top of the bus to the side there's no fear element. It's really a comfortable working environment. You don't have that. I don't know, being strapped up. There's just you're preoccupied with that, and being able to work this way is really great. With a dozen buses, I think we're fine with the fall protection and everything. But when we have 104 buses, we're going to have this in the heavy equipment shop. And the reason it's in the heavy equipment shop is because it's not only the batteries, but it's the HVAC and it's the other systems that are up there. And we're going to need a way to access those quickly, efficiently. And what it does is it ensures us at a different level that this is going to happen. You know, because I remember inspecting the buses, and I pretty much told my colleague that I'm not going up there anymore.
Yeah.
Not that I couldn't. It's just I thought, you go up there, you do this, and I'm going to stay down here and do all the rest of this stuff. and just because, you know, I think that it was prudent, but it was, you know, with those platforms, that would change it. It would change the frequency of the inspection. It would change the comfort of that. And I think that we would do a better job of maintaining those systems with that on there. So I think that whether it's your system or another comparable type of system, I think if you're going into this, whether it's battery electric, hydrogen, anything else, we're going to have a lot of stuff on top of the bus. And I think you really need to be aware that the comfort and safety of your employees is paramount. And the only thing holding us up now is the configuration of all the shops. Once we establish the battery electric bus shop, because with 12 we don't have a bus shop for that, but with 100 we're going to have dedicated bays, dedicated work, dedicated chargers and such, and so we're going to need dedicated equipment for that. And I think this hits that on the head.
My final comment is just hearing how much there is that for everybody to learn, and how nothing's easy, right? There's not like an easy path to follow with this transition. Anything that can be done to make any part of it a little bit easier could have huge benefits in making the transition successful and supporting the agency's goals. So that's really good perspective. So thank you, David, so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Appreciate your insight.
All right. Well, thank you so much.